Hello and welcome to Orsa Knits. I hope that you've all been really enjoying your summer and that you've managed to stay cool amid all of this really warm weather. Here in Italy there's been some really scorching days and I found it hard to get up the motivation to continue knitting when it's sort of 35+ degrees. So I will say that my knitting has been on hold a little bit while I've been visiting family and just suffering through this really hot weather. However, I did promise myself that this year I would knit more summer tops, so I've been on a mission to do exactly that. And I have 4 summer tops to show you today, 2 which I've recently completed and 2 which are underway and I'm really excited about making. The first finished object I have to show you is actually a test knit that I did for the designer Kolibri by Johanna, and it's this really pretty George's top. Now, I fell in love with this when I saw the lovely bow details on the shoulders, but I think what has to be my favourite thing about this finished piece is the fact that the front and the neckline are both really plunging, which just give it a very romantic feel, and I think I do feel very elegant when I wear this. This top was quite a quick knit and I knit it in 2 strands of Knitting for Olive pure silk, and I think that the colour is called Dusty Petroleum, and it's this very interesting shade of navy. It's not really dark. It does have a kind of like smoky dustiness to it, but I personally quite enjoy that. And Knitting for Olive pure silk, as I've said before, is just such a joy to work with. And I think it's especially nice to work with when you actually hold 2 strands together. And I have to say that Aran or worsted weight yarn is probably my favourite weight to work with, just because you're not knitting on massive needles that feel a little bit intimidating, but you do still get that satisfying speed that you just don't get when you're knitting with something like a fingering weight merino and a mohair. Now, the pattern originally says to knit it in 2 pieces and seam it together down the sides, but because I'm not a huge fan, as I mentioned in a previous video, of knitting things when it's not in the round, I decided to adapt it, and so I knit it from the bottom up, the body as a tube, and then I went into the flat details for the bows, so just backwards and forwards, still on my circular needles. And I do feel that that worked quite well, but I will just say one thing about knitting the body in the round and then going on to knit these bits flat is that there is quite a lot of discrepancy in your tension and the overall look of your stitches when you go from that really neat finish that I personally get when I knit in the round to knitting backwards and forwards. It just seemed like the top bit, each row had a little bit more space in between, and I tried to sort of rip back and try that again to try and get a more even tension, but even with trying to be really careful, it is difficult to get your tension as even as it will be when you're knitting in the round. However, even if the tension is a little bit dodgy on the top, I still think that the finish of this top is very nice. I'm really happy with the way that it looks. The fabric is gorgeous and cool, and the bows are just such a lovely detail to this. I haven't worn this that much yet, but I am planning on wearing it a few times, maybe just for walking about or maybe for going for a drink with my boyfriend, just when I want to feel quite elegant and a little bit more dressed up. Of course, this top also works really well as a nice casual piece. I think especially if you knit it maybe in a cream or some other neutral light shade. That would be really sweet for the daytime in summer, and the bows would be gorgeous in almost any colour. And the instructions for the bows make it quite simple to knit. And there is also a video that she includes showing you how to tie it together to get a really neat finish. And this is a piece that I think really benefits from quite a stiff block, just because if you don't block out the bows, they can look a little bit more crumpled than you might like. They definitely look a lot better after they've been spread out and flattened, and maybe a gentle steam might help that too. All in all, this is a beautiful quick project for the summer. The designer was very nice to work with and she took a lot of feedback on board, and I would definitely love to test with her again. She has lots of sweet designs and I'll include her Instagram down below so you can go and check her out. Now on to my second finished object, which was another small piece in worsted weight. You can tell I am definitely in the mood for knitting bigger things that don't take me as long and don't require as much brain power. Now, I did say that I was going to be a monogamous knitter. However, I have broken that rule this summer just because, as I mentioned, I wanted to give myself options of a couple of projects to work on depending on how I was feeling. Just because there are a few things that I'm working on at the moment which are a little bit more complex and probably wouldn't be suitable for when I'm on holiday, when I'm traveling, like taking a train, or when I just want to sit around with my family and I don't want to have to use too much brain power to think about what I'm knitting. And this top, which was the Sugarboo Bralette, was absolutely perfect for this. Aran weight yarn, such a simple, gorgeous classic design, and I just know I'm going to make more of these when it comes to autumn. This particular one I knit up in this lovely chai latte shade of Tweed Delight from Hobbii. And if you haven't seen my Hobbii yarn review video, I will link it in a card up above. In that video, I talk a little bit more in depth about what I feel about some of the Hobbii yarns that I'd received and what I thought that they would be good for. So yes, I took the plunge and I decided to go with the Sugarboo Bralette for this Tweed Delight, and I'm definitely not disappointed. This yarn is a real delight to work with, as the name would suggest. It manages to be fluffy and plump, but at the same time extremely strong. So it's really quite difficult to actually break it apart, which makes it very, very easy to knit, just because it does have a similar quality to something like a roving yarn in terms of its fluffy plumpness, but you don't get any of that messy breakage that you might get with something like that. Because I remember the stress of trying to work my first ever larger piece, which was just a chunky scarf in West Yorkshire Spinners Retreat roving yarn. And I had no experience really with knitting, and I was starting and I was holding the yarn too tight and plunging my needle in, and if it would just catch the middle of the strand, it would make the whole yarn break apart, and then you would have this fluffy mess that you would have to try and mend back together. So yes, for people who are slightly concerned that this might be a roving type yarn, that's not something you have to worry about here. It's really strong and it's really nice to work with. And this Sugarboo Bralette pattern is fabulous. I really like the details that the designer has included that keep it nice and simple but also give it a very polished finish. I think the neckline just looks really nice and clean. And I also altered this bralette by lengthening it quite substantially because I don't really tend to wear crop tops. I prefer tops that are a little bit longer that I can kind of wear as a camisole, or in this case, that I can tuck into my jeans. And the fact that the ribbing is so firm yet really, really stretchy and very form-fitting and flattering on your body means that it really sticks to me, and I can tuck it very neatly into my jeans and it just looks invisible, which is really, really nice. The other feature of this bralette that I adore are the lovely I-cord straps. They're just really sweet and very, very quick to work up. Now, I did initially make mine probably a little bit too long because I tried it on and I just wasn't completely convinced. So I ripped that back a bit as well and shortened them. And I really hope that I've got it cracked now and it's perfect. Anyway, yeah, I really recommend this pattern to anybody who is looking for something to knit in Aran weight that they can tuck into jeans that looks really cool and casual and would work for the summer when you just want to wear a little top, but also for the winter when you might want to pair something like this in wool with a big chunky cardigan. I think I will definitely knit another one of these, and I reckon making it a twin set with a nice matching cardigan would be really gorgeous. The first work in progress that I want to share with you is the very exciting Peacock Tee that I'm knitting for a knit-along that I'm actually hosting with another fellow podcaster, and that is Francesca from An Italian Knitter here on YouTube and Instagram. We are going to be hosting this knit-along for 3 months, so July, August and September, where we're going to be knitting any pattern by the designer Lene Samsoe. Now I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, and our knit-along is called the knitalong, and we're making absolutely any pattern by her. We've got a little Instagram group where we're sharing tips and showing each other progress pictures, so if you do fancy that, then drop me a message here or on Instagram and I'll get you added to that little group. And anyway, on to my whip. This is the Peacock Tee, as I mentioned, and it features this absolutely gorgeous, very detailed textured yoke, which is lacy and involves a lot of purling and yarn overs that just make it really gorgeous and kind of gives it this wavy kind of fan shape. This pattern was included in my summer plans video that I did a couple of months ago, and I'm just really excited that it's turning out as nice as it looked in a lot of the pictures. It did take me quite a while to properly get into this because I don't know if this is a problem anybody else has, but sometimes I get really impatient when it comes to counting stitches, and this piece has a little bit of a fiddly German short row section that you do, which also includes some lacy details, and I was trying to count them and I always seem to be a couple of stitches short, which would kind of mess up and distort the lacework at the back. So yeah, me and my impatience meant that I had to frog this top 4 times until I've actually been able to get to this point. But I'm really relieved that the yoke is finally coming together, and I think I've only got a few lines left until it's finished. And then it's just straight stockinette and a little bit of rib and I'll be done. And even though it was a little bit of a nightmare with me not counting properly, this top is really pretty. And I already know that it's going to be something that I'll get quite a lot of wear out of because I think it will be really cool. It's knit up in this Sandnes Garn yarn called Lene, at least that's how I would pronounce it, which is an absolutely lovely blend of viscose, linen and cotton. And the texture of this yarn is very interesting. It's Aran weight yarn, and I would say it feels quite similar to silk. So something like the Knitting for Olive Pure Silk has a similar slightly tacky and sort of chain-like structure. So if you're interested in this yarn and you like that one, I would definitely recommend checking it out if you can find it in a local yarn shop. And I purchased this yarn from the lovely ladies over at strick.it, which is an Italian yarn seller online, and they do loads and loads of Sandnes Garn stuff, so they're the perfect place to try Sandnes Garn if you fancy it. And they also very kindly offered us a discount code for knitters here in Italy, but I reckon there are only probably a couple of colours left. However, if you want to join our knit-along and you fancy making this exact top, I will drop that discount code down below in the description for any knitters in Italy who might want to try and order this Sandnes Garn line from strick.it. And yeah, here you can see the yoke in all its glory. Even though it looks quite complex, I have to say that once I got past the issues with my dodgy German short row counting, it's quite straightforward, and the lace details are formed just with very clever placement of yarn overs and pearl stitches, which create this, as I said, almost wavy design. I initially thought I would make this top in a creamy colour, but the colour that I liked the look of was out of stock. So I switched over to this sort of navy shade, which, if you can't already tell, I'm very into my navies and blues this summer, and I'm really happy with it. This is the colour that you'll see in all of the pattern pictures for this top, and it's a really nice shade, similar to the Knitting for Olive shade, a kind of dusty navy that I think will just pair really well with a lot of my cream trousers, and even denim actually, it would look quite nice with too. So yeah, so far this has been a really fun project. As I said, I'm hoping now I've done most of the yoke, I'll have kind of plain sailing through the rest of the stockinette body, and I reckon next time I update you on my knitting progress it will be all done and probably will have been worn loads because it will be perfect for this weather. And now moving on to my second whip, which is one of the camisoles by My Favourite Things. Because she numbers them, just give me a sec because I need to check what the number is. It's kind of difficult to remember. So yeah, this is camisole number 5 by My Favourite Things, and many of you will have seen this on Instagram or seen other podcasters make it because it's just such a classic, well-designed and polished looking piece. I will say it's not for people who don't like rib, and it's also not really for people who don't like knitting on tiny needles with fingering weight yarn, because even though it looks deceptively small as a garment, it does take really quite a long time. And the elements that make it very special, like the double knitted finishing here and the nice neat collar, they do add a lot of time and they require a lot of attention to detail for anybody who's interested in making this piece. That aside, not to put you off, I do think that it's going to be absolutely gorgeous when it's finished. I went for this sort of neutral in-between shade of Knitting for Olive Merino, which is called Nordic Beach. And I really love that name. It makes me think of sort of wearing creams and neutrals by the seaside during the summer, and I think it's just a perfect description of this colour. It's kind of between a sand shade and a sort of grey, but I think because it's so in between, it will look good with a lot of different things. And this is another top that I thought about making because I felt like it would work well in the summer when it's really warm, just worn on its own, but also worn with a cardigan or even underneath a higher necked jumper in the winter, just to give you that little layer of merino warmth. And I'd been worried when I first started on the tiny needles that it was going to take me ages, but I went really fast through the construction of the front and back, which you knit straight and then you kind of join them together. And I thought, okay, wow, this was quite fast, even though it's rib, even though it's a tiny fingering weight yarn on really tiny needles. I'll be okay, I'll breeze through it. And yeah, I have been knitting this top for a month. I mean, yes, working on other things and also having my holiday in between, but still, it is taking me quite a while. Now, that doesn't mean that I haven't really enjoyed making it, and I am actually probably, because I'm a bit of a masochist, gonna make another one, maybe in black, just because I think that the design is so clever. And I've never actually made a double knit edge before, and oh my goodness, the quality that you get when you spend that bit of extra time to do a double knit edge is really worth it. And the technique is something that I'm definitely thinking about incorporating into a jumper design when it comes to winter. And all in all, like many of the My Favourite Things patterns, the construction of it is just really clever, but also so flattering to a lot of different figures. I think that I'll personally wear this probably tucked into trousers, just like my Sugarboo Bralette, and I think it will just look very chic, very minimal, and very cool. And talking about plans for the future, once I've finished all of my summer knitting, I'm really excited to get started with some of my autumn plans. I do have several designs that I've been thinking about all summer long. I had planned to maybe design a couple of summer tops, but I've also been really happy to finally see my grandparents after years of not seeing them during the pandemic, and I really enjoyed doing that for a bit, and I've also enjoyed just having a little bit of a rest. So sorry to regular viewers who maybe were wondering where I went for a whole month, but I am coming back definitely feeling recharged and trying to slowly get myself back into my routine. Anyway, that was my little summer knitting update. Do let me know if there are any patterns you think I should check out for this sort of end of summer knitting time, and keep an eye out for more autumnal themed things that will be coming around early September. I'm so excited for the autumn and I've just got so many ideas, and I can't wait, even though I've quite enjoyed doing my summer knits, to get back into knitting with mohair and wool and fluffy, warm, cuddly, cozy things. So thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you again next time. Bye!